Today, we're going to learn what it was like to run a computer retail business in the late 90s by interviewing someone that did just that, my dad. Dad owns several computer renaissance stores in the greater Seattle area from 1995 to the early 2000s. We're going to sit down and talk with him about what it was like to get into the business, what led to its eventual financial demise, and all the things that happened in between. Let's get into it. So Dad, introduce yourself and tell us a little background about how you got into the computing industry in the mid-90s.
All right. Well, I'm Brad Ausen, and the way I got into retail computing, or having stores, Inc. magazine, everybody's heard of that, I suppose. It had
Some people.
brochure for a franchise system that did new and used computers, trading new and used computers, which kind of spoke to me because I like repairing electronic equipment. I like dealing with electronic equipment, and I liked the idea of having a business around that. So it just fit my personality. And this franchise group also had Play It Against Sports. Mine was Computer Renaissance. They had Once Upon a Child, and they all had the same theme, new and used equipment around those activities. And so in 1994, I went to Minneapolis, where they were headquartered.
What was the name of the parent company?
They were called Gro Biz at that time. They were sold in the late 90s, or Computer Renaissance piece of it was sold. And anyway, went out to Gro Biz, and they take you through their corporate stores. They had about, I think, 3 or 4 corporate stores, and then they had individuals in that area that were franchisees, and we got to go to their stores. And you could ask open questions of them and see how they liked it. And as I got into it more, it was something that really did fit me. So then I put down a franchise fee, where you start your license activity for that. And then in 95, early 90, well, no, it was still 94, went to their training class where they train the new owners. They want to use their turnkey concept so that all the stores run in a similar fashion. So that's what the training is about. And then I opened my first store in Federal Way, Washington in 1995, March of 95.
Did they help you find a location? Like, what was the benefit they were providing?
They have a real estate division. You find the real estate. They tell you what to look for, and that's, in this case, you're buying a zone. So in my area, there were already 3 other owners, one with a store open. And so the zone map had an 8-mile radius around a store, so you couldn't impact another store owner's business. And so I chose Federal Way because it has a large population, and it was quite a ways away from the existing store, which was in Bellevue, Washington.
Near Seattle.
Near Seattle. Yeah, Federal Way is probably 35, 40 miles from Seattle. They want you to use grade A real estate. So I found a pad that's for lease, and then their real estate guy flies out and inspects it and suggest for Buildout, how much it's going to cost for Buildout, as well as how to deal in the lease negotiation. So they help with that.
And then the Buildout was to make the store look like all the other Computer Renaissance stores. And so
there was a style that they all had to...
You had some pictures of the Buildout happening. Were those like your buddies helping, or did they
friends of mine from work.
So they gave you like diagrams and stuff and pictures of how it should look.
Right.
And your work buddies helped you out?
How many, the decorative trim on the top next to the ceiling had to be 2 colors, Computer Renaissance colors, and then we used what was called slat wall for retail shelving, and that had to be mounted. Yeah, here the picture shows what we did to improve the space. And then it had a particular carpet color, so hired somebody to do that, friend of, well, you know him, Jim.
Yeah.
He came in and laid the carpet.
Do you care if we talk about the franchise fee?
No.
So you saved a document where it was $20,000. And so I was curious, that $20,000 is a lot in 1994 or 95. It's a lot now.
It was.
How'd you come up? Did you borrow, or how'd you come up with that? Or you had it?
Well, I've always gone for multiple sources of income. So I had rentals. that I had accumulated by then. I think I had 3 rentals by then, and so there was equity in that, and I could get a pull out capital from my equity of the rentals.
Sort of like a HELOC.
Like a HELOC. I basically refied them and pulled money out
of the houses. Okay.
And so it was $20,000 for the franchise fee, and then to open a store in 1995 was about $160,000 total.
The fee, and then
everything, inventory, the build out, the whole schmear.
Did they provide
working
you with
capital,
a place to buy inventory? So the computers, or did you have to go figure that out, that distribution stuff yourself?
This was a nice aspect of Computer Renaissance. They had a department that was sourcing used gear to open up stores with. They didn't want you to continue with that. It was to help you get open, ready, and looked filled.
Yeah.
Right? So you bought your initial inventory from them.
That's really cool.
And they shipped it out from Minneapolis. Back to the fee, the $160,000, you had to have $60,000 cash and $100,000 loan, which was a small business administration loan.
Right.
And the $60,000 equity came from pulling equity out of my rentals. So that's how that happened. The SBA loan back in that time period was 12% interest. And it was I believe it was a 7-year loan.
$100,000, 12%, 7-year loan.
Yeah, it was a pretty healthy payment.
So you had the Federal Way store, and the setup of the store was, the whole shtick was buy, sell, trade. New and used computing equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also a repair aspect. So there were sections of the store where you would
service
equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Did they help you stand that up? Like, how'd you find people that were knowledgeable enough? Were you doing it yourself for a while?
Well, back then you advertised in newspapers.
Yeah.
So I ran an ad. I was looking for a technician that knew personal computers, Mac equipment, and also salespeople for computer sales. And so that drew in a lot of people, most of which probably were not qualified. But out of that, I did find my initial technician turned out to be pretty good. The initial salespeople, I ended up getting better at hiring. So finally, the salespeople were quite a bit better. You needed somebody that liked computing equipment. They were passionate about it. You had to be excited about it
in front of the customer, right? Yeah.
And then they already knew what it took to get to that learning curve. So if the customer wasn't there, and I think the reports you went through told how many, in the franchise document, how many people had computers in their homes back then. It was...
I could dig.
I don't know if
Dad kept an absolute ton of documents. So these are newsletters that the stores were putting out every month, and I'll zoom in on those later as we discuss them. But there's also just franchise information documents that I'll put on the screen and we'll go over. Yeah, I can't remember.
I think it was something like only a third or maybe 45% of homes had personal computers in them so far.
In 95.
So it looked like this huge green market that you could sell to.
It's important to remember too, in 95, like the web was just picking up, and computing in general, having a computer in your home in general, as you're saying, just starting to like really take off.
Yeah, the web was just getting started in 95, but most people were in that first year using bulletin boards that they'd dial into with their modems.
Yeah, the BBS
and then the
boards.
higher speed modems started coming out almost paralleled with Windows 95. So Windows 95 is probably what kicked off a huge movement towards the web.
Did you have the store up and running when 95 came out? Like, do you remember that being a big event?
95 came out just prior to that, but the adoption occurred in 95 and 96, where it penetrated the market.
Did that influence, like, what was the makeup of the type of machines you had? So Macs, of course, but Mac wasn't as popular.
Macs were going down. The sales were going down on Macs, although we sold Macs, probably 10%, maybe a little less than that of our sales. The equipment at that time, Pentium was just releasing a Pentium 90. But most people were buying between 286s and 386s, a few 486s in the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But as the Windows 95 adopted, everybody was moving to 486s initially. The Pentiums had a slowdown because of a math error in the Pentium 90.
That's right, yeah.
And once it was determined virtually nobody hit that math error, then the Pentium sales took on.
Do you remember that math error is interesting? So that was a huge sort of not a scandal, but a big
Media
issue,
created a bigger
for Intel.
scare.
It was a big scare, and it was everywhere in the media. Do you remember that actually impacting sales, or you were just worried about it?
It didn't impact sales. It just slowed down the adoption of the Pentium for a
so they
little
would just
while.
buy something else, a 486 or something.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, it didn't. Sales through that period were crazy. The initial sales of the store start out slow, but I opened in March, and by August I was doing a profitable level of sales. I could draw an income again.
Wow, that's only a few months.
Yeah,
That's impressive.
And it normally would take about a year.
For a healthy business.
And then sales just continued to climb through that whole period right up till the end of 1999. And towards the end of 99, there was probably preloading. People were buying computers because they feared the 2000 millennium bug.
Yeah.
So sales that normally would have happened in 2000 or later were brought forward to 98 and 99.
Interesting.
And when that was over, and the millennium bug didn't materialize either. The sales drop was dramatic towards the end of 99. So probably a 30% drop in sales for all computer sales. And at that time there was Computer City, there was CompUSA, there was Circuit City. You had the good guys. They were even selling computers in Safeway stores and Toys R Us.
And also prices were dropping, right?
And prices were dropping.
I'll dig up some info to put over on the screen about what a 486 cost in 1995, but it was a lot more than what a Pentium 2 cost several years later. Right.
Yeah, you're chasing, you're computing, your inventory was decaying as you owned it. You had to turn it rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
But with the slowdown, everybody was then losing money, myself included, towards the end of 99.
Being profitable really quickly in 95
to very unprofitable.
End of 99.
Because you had so much supply capacity with all these stores selling computing equipment, and they all had to lower prices to get rid of this gear that's getting lower and lower in prices as time went on. They're all competing and trying to hold out to see who could survive the other. And a lot of stores shut down. Good guys did. Circuit City pulled out. Yeah. Ballard Computers was a big one in the Seattle area.
Yep. Massive.
And at a certain point, it just wasn't going to be a profitable business anymore. The margin on new equipment's fairly low, where on the used equipment it was high.
That's
50% margin.
Yeah.
But as computing equipment became so inexpensive, people would opt for new over used.
Interesting.
And so your margins as a store owner went away or were greatly reduced.
So you're making less or negative money in late 99.
It wasn't a fun time.
Did you have multiple stores by then?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about, you had the first store in March of 95 in Federal Way, Washington, and then how did it grow from there?
There was an owner that wanted to sell his store in Tacoma, and he also had a franchise location in Silverdale, Washington. He wanted to open up there. So he offered his store to me in 97, and I purchased it. So I had the two stores, and incidentally, they were both profitable.
And this is when
through 99.
Sales were still booming, though.
Booming.
Yeah.
But they would have been profitable even into 2000. It's just that when I expanded, I then expanded to 2 more stores after that, which then I was overextended from an inventory perspective, and so it was difficult to manage that many stores.
And you had more employees. Everything cost
more employees. I had 25 to 30 employees in the 4 stores. And plus I had a warehouse operation. So in the background, I created another company to refurbish and rebuild equipment to sell to computer stores, a wholesale operation.
Yeah.
And it additionally had another 25 employees.
So you had upwards of 50 employees with that going.
50 at its peak. And when the sales turned the opposite direction, 50 employees becomes huge. As you had to downsize, which was not any fun. Just not any fun.
So let's talk about the warehouses. So Dad had the wholesale operation in the background that was feeding the 4 stores, and did other computer stores buy from there, or did that ever materialize?
They initially were buying from there. I sold to Oregon, Idaho, the rest of Washington. There were a total of 9 Computer Renaissance stores in Washington, I think. At the peak.
Okay, so it wasn't just your stores it was
we
feeding.
sold all over.
Okay.
And we would drop ship them out, UPS them out.
Yeah.
Okay, the wholesale operation led into a partnership in the Seattle area. We closely coordinated with each other, and we collected our ad campaign together. So we were on radio, and we did for the Seattle stores. There were 6 Seattle stores altogether, and Silverdale was 7th, and so on. We had a monthly ad budget that went to about $50,000 a month.
Oh, geez.
A radio budget.
That's impressive.
And that really drove sales, surprisingly. You could target the kind of audience. Radio is cut up into unique markets. So you could find out what your customer base listened to, and then your ads would go there. And that worked really well until '99. Back to when you're losing money, suddenly you can't afford that advertising.
To do that.
So we had to drop radio. Television was never affordable at our level of volume. You'd have to be a very large operation to be able to do television ads.
Interesting. Let's back to the warehouse for a moment. I know one of the questions folks had is the assembly line of computers. So both where you were getting all the OEM parts and how you arranged all that, how you were building them, and did you come up with the whole assembly line operation? And I think you were using Norton Ghost. Was it Ghost?
Don't remember.
You'd image Windows 95 or 98, for example, onto a bunch of hard drives, and then just
we would image. We had tests. We'd do 24-hour testing, burn-in testing on them. Yeah, we created the assembly line of basically a set of tables, and we did do our runs. We had particular lines. We called them Quest 1, Quest 2, and so on. But they had different levels of memory and drive size, hard drive sizes. And so we probably manufactured several thousand PCs, clone PCs. I couldn't give you an exact count, but it was probably, 5,000.
Over the course of the
the 4 or 5 years there. And we would send that out. But sourcing, they kind of find you. They know about you, and they start calling you. So memory companies are calling you and offering prices, hard drive, people that dealt with hard drives, the board manufacturers, not manufacturers, but their distributors would be contacting you. And so you would make your decisions around that.
So it was kind of the opposite direction. The OEMs were in the business of finding people to buy.
Yeah, we're their customers, and you're a customer. So they're finding us.
You weren't hunting them down. That makes sense.
We would search sometimes for unique gear. Like we had a local, not that I should tell people this, but we sold equipment to call centers. They found us wanting to see if we'd bid that.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out, what is this equipment? How do you put it together, and how does it work? So we figured out places that sourced equipment like that, and we'd buy it and build their server machines that would run their data centers. So then we'd have their server that had phone numbers that dialed, and then it would hand off to a set of PCs in a room. So basically the way it worked, it was a switching system. So it would call, the computer would recognize that somebody answered, and it's trying to find somebody in this population of employees that's available and sends them the call.
Interesting.
And the equipment does that, right? And so when you ever had someone call you and it click and hang up, the computer had nobody to hand it to, so it just hangs up.
So it gives up.
Yeah. That was for an auto glass company.
Oh, okay.
They would find someone, you have a chip in your windshield, and well, we can repair that for you.
So if you're getting those calls, you can blame him.
I didn't do too many of those. We did have small businesses that wanted servers, so we'd have to
like PCs.
servers for their operations. That they'd have local area networks set up.
Rack mounted or just bigger?
No, they were
beefier
just
PCs,
tower
PCs.
more memory, more
like small
hard
business
drive,
type deal.
more connectivity on the back of them.
Yeah.
We sold into large companies too. They would ask us to bid a memory upgrade for multiple PCs and stuff like that.
And then you would actually upgrade in place or something.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Back to the warehouse stuff. So I was 7 years old in 1995 when you got the first store. And so the stores were fun. I could go in there, but I couldn't really dick around in there because like there were customers and stuff. And there was only so much room in the back where they were doing all the repairs and stuff. And those guys didn't want me in their hair, but the warehouses were much bigger. And so I had like free reign. I'm sure your employees hated me, but I could like go anywhere and look at anything and do whatever I wanted. And Dad would buy huge used lots from like, I want to say like banks getting rid of their like
banks,
IBM PS2
health
inventory,
organizations, health insurance companies.
Yeah, health insurance and hospitals and things like that. And so there would be these huge boxes and pallets just full of computers and cables and walkie-talkies and like anything these companies were getting rid of.
You know, they wanted to get rid of their equipment. I wanted the computer gear. And with that came typewriters and televisions and
tons of stuff.
VCRs and all kinds of stuff.
And so when I was a kid, I can directly attribute part of my interest in computing to spending hours and hours just wading through that stuff, and I could do whatever, you know. Your guys that were working there were mostly building new stuff, and the used stuff was just worked on a little bit. And so I never got to take any of it home, but I could, well, some of it, I guess. But because that was money on the table.
You got to build computers there.
I built a lot of computers. I don't know. You must have taught me. I remember there was a period where you were building them at home in the basement.
Yeah.
You would come home after work at the store, and you would be building tons, and I would help you with that a little bit.
The demand was so high. We had to keep the shelves looking. If your store didn't look like it had inventory, people are going, what's going on here?
What's wrong with this
So
place?
stuff would sell so fast, and you had trouble sourcing enough to keep it looking full. So, I was busy in the basement at night building the computing
I remember
equipment.
you at least keeping you company or something. I don't know how useful I was back then. But I could build a computer by the time I was 8 or 9, I think, for sure. A PC anyway.
Well, something we offered, I think it was maybe unique to our store, we offered build classes. People wanted to build their own computer equipment, but they didn't know how.
Yeah.
So we would pitch, you could build your own computer, and they would come into the store and they'd pick out a tower and they'd pick out the kind of motherboard they wanted, the sound card, the video card, the amount of memory, the size of hard drive, the type of CPU they wanted to put in it. And we would hold a class with 4 or 5 people, and a technician would take them through how to mount it, how to protect it from static electricity, and so on.
And that would have been a big deal in the late 90s, because then you go home and you could say, I built this or whatever. And then now it's less of a big deal. But a lot of people still, I guess today, don't know how to put a computer together.
Gamers would still build their own game machines.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've only built, I think, my own computers.
I think that's maybe a function of price, too. As the prices got so cheap, you could buy a brand new
fully built
Pentium computer for $500 by the end of the early 2000 maybe.
Yeah.
And so building your own just wasn't practical anymore.
Yeah. I think we've gotten to the late 90s. You have 4 stores, at least 1 warehouse. There were several, I recall.
Two warehouses.
2.
One was strictly monitors. We would buy used monitors in lots of sometimes over 1,000 at a time. We sold so many monitors, and these are the old CRT cathode ray tube monitors. And sometimes we'd have to refurbish them. They would be dirty, get the outsides all cleaned up. Sometimes they wouldn't work, and the most common problems with a monitor was a capacitor would blow inside, and so you could identify that and take out and solder in a new capacitor. The other problem was the switches get gummed up with carbon, and they're a pretty simple on-off switch, and we'd clean those up, and if it worked, then we could sell that. Otherwise, we'd have to recycle the equipment if it was more complex. It wasn't worthwhile.
Right, to diagnose.
We're buying the used monitors for $25 a piece and selling them for $50 a piece. And so you just needed to churn through them. But we sold, at that price point then, we sold a lot of monitors. I cannot imagine, because we were getting a constant supply of monitors.
You had one good saved picture of that warehouse, and it's just full of monitors.
Okay, there you go.
I'll put it up there. Yeah, it's
lots
just
of monitors.
A field of monitors. Yeah.
And shipped that out to all the stores in the Seattle area, and even the Eastern Washington stores would come over and buy and fill up a van and take them back to their stores.
Amazing.
So we sold a lot of, a ton of monitors. You wonder whatever happened to all those. When I did my shutdown, I had 100 brand new 15-inch monitors. They were virtually brand new. We purchased on a big chunk out of a health organization in Spokane that was getting all new equipment after 2 years. So these monitors were about 2 years old. So they were virtually new, and bought them for $5 a piece. and bought, I think it was 500 of them.
Yes.
And they were still selling for about $50 a piece then, but I was shutting down my stores as my leases ended, and here I'm stuck with about 100 monitors in my warehouse. And to get rid of them, I just put an ad in Craigslist for free. You can have them. It was really interesting. A guy came out, wanted all 100 of them. I go, what do you do with them? He goes, well, it's really ironic. We ship them back to China. They come from China, but we ship them back. And this firm opens them up and puts in a TV tuner and sells them as cheap TVs in China. So they make it all the way back.
Travel back and forth.
yeah. Well, that's fascinating. And that was his business, was to send electronic equipment back to China for whatever they
their
repurpose in their new and used computer industry.
We're starting to talk about shutting down. So like 99, not good financially. And then
not good. And then I had a health scare.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about a small business, without the owner, they will probably collapse in a 2 to 3 week period. You know, that someone has to be looking over everything. Someone had to be in charge of the payroll and cash and so on.
Yeah.
So that kind of worried me. I needed a way to have continuity of the business, and I thought it was still a going concern at that point. And I was really well connected with my Seattle Computer Renaissance owners that, you know, we collaborated together a lot. And so I suggested a combined business that started with our Olympia store. We opened a store in Olympia, and we'd be co-owners. And then they would also take an ownership within our warehouse operation. But then as it's losing money and not all of us could find capital to contribute in an equal way, I thought it best to shut down, which created hard feelings amongst the owners, but it just was going to get financially worse.
So do you think you hedged it getting worse? I mean, it was already bad, so you were not making money, right?
It softened the blow
the inevitable
by discontinuing the partnership. And then shutting down the stores was difficult because you have 5-year leases. And if you try to get out of a lease early, they accelerate the whole portion. So I just signed up on Federal Way, not Federal Way, but in Tacoma. So in 99 for a 5-year lease, $2,800 a month, something like that, which is way cheaper than what it is today.
Right.
But they would, if I'd shut it down in 2000, they'd want
all 5 years.
3 more years.
3 more years.
They'd say 36 times $2,500. That's what you owe to walk away. So I did keep 2 of the stores open because their leases ran longer.
Okay. Just
finished them out, losing money. I had found a job at that point, and so I would augment the losses with my income.
Actual income. Yeah, there was a lot of. I didn't realize that at the time. I was fairly young, becoming a teenager. But looking back on it, you were under a lot of pressure because you had you had your full-time job. So Dad, you did all this, the computer stuff, I don't know, 8, 9 years.
8 years.
And Dad still managed to go work at Boeing for 30 plus years, a big career. So like, yeah, you were working at Boeing full time, which was demanding. And then at night, basically, I remember this is all you did. You were filing paperwork and dealing with the computers and whoever else was still working for you. And yeah, pretty crazy.
We were organized as Subchapter S, so the paperwork was pretty daunting. Tax returns were enormous. I don't know that it has to be that. Today you'd probably set it up as a limited liability corporation, much simpler tax paperwork. But at that time you had to use a Subchapter S.
What is a Subchapter S? Like a proper corporation?
It's like a miniature corporation.
A miniature corporation.
That you only get taxed on the money passes through to the owner and then you're taxed as an individual tax return. But you get all the protection of a corporation. Yeah, but basically when I did shut down, I was able to make most of the people that I owed money to whole, or we had mutually agreed agreements. So for example, I had a line of credit and I could not pay all of it. And so I proposed to them I would pay back their principal and some of the interest. Otherwise, I'd be technically bankrupt.
Right.
So they said, okay, we like that. And on leases, to get out of some of the leases early, I would go, I'm just not going to be able to continue. What if I pay you 2 months forward lease, giving you time to release?
Yeah.
Would that be acceptable rather than an acceleration of the lease? And 2 of the 4 stores agreed to that.
Wow, that probably saved a lot.
Better Way did, and I had to shut that down early because I just didn't have the staff anymore, and they wanted the 12 months of lease. They would not agree. That whole complex is gone. It's a light rail station now.
Oh, really?
It's gone. It's just, yeah, it's a big...
If you live in Federal Way, it was by the Laser Quest, where the Laser Quest used to be.
Laser Quest, yeah,
it's in that same little area.
Same mall.
Same strip mall.
A funny side note on that mall. It was next to it. My store was next to it, C's Candy.
Yeah, I remember that.
And what's interesting is your sales would gyrate depending upon what's going on. So an example would be if there were football games, Seahawks football games on Sunday, sales would go down because your demographic is at the game.
Yeah.
And people that buy computers is at the game. Another one that most stores would lose money or have low sales would be Valentine's Day, because on Valentine's Day, the people are out getting gifts for their significant others.
Going out to dinner and stuff.
Well, in my case, I'm next to a C's Candy. Where do they go for getting a gift for Valentine's Day? They would go in there and they would say, oh, there's a computer store over here, and bring in the box of chocolates, and then they'd go out with a computer and their box of chocolates. So my sales actually did okay on Valentine's Day.
Okay, location is everything. There was the pressure of all these other people, other companies selling computers. So you had a huge surplus and prices going down, and sort of the Y2K rush was over. Everyone had a computer that needed a computer during that time frame, basically. Right. Were there any other pressures, you think, that sort of led to the demise or to make it so that you couldn't operate these anymore, basically?
No, the price drop is probably the biggest significant item. Mail order wasn't impacting us too much yet. There was Gateway Computers, and Dell Computers was actually mail order at the time, but they didn't have a big impact then on us. They were doing well.
So it wasn't like online shopping or anything that
Amazon sold
that would have happened.
Amazon sold books then.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, I don't know when like Newegg started, but I guess that would have been mid 2000s.
Well,
maybe that would have been a problem.
They were impacted about the same time. In '99, they were still Egghead stores.
Did that become Newegg?
Yeah, they announced that they were shutting down all their retail stores and going strictly online because the web was now robust enough to do that. And then they were the impetus of Newegg. I'm pretty sure. You might look that up.
Yeah, we'll check that one.
But they basically went totally online.
Big software company, or excuse me, big software sales. And did they have hardware?
Very little.
Very little. Mostly software. Egghead was a Seattle area.
They might offer mice and stuff, keyboards and things like that.
Peripherals, things like that.
Yeah.
Egghead Software didn't have any affiliation with Newegg.com and in fact went bankrupt in 2001. Here's a 1998 article of what Dad was talking about, where they were moving their brick and mortar operation entirely online. And oddly enough, after they went bankrupt, Amazon bought their domain name. How big was the software side of things? Did you sell a lot of software? Or was it all just hardware mostly? We didn't
sell a lot of software other than the operating system. We'd have to sell that with we usually bundled that in the price.
Yeah.
So people didn't normally come to us for a lot in software sales. So no, we didn't. We were mostly hardware. And our service organization did really well. There were very few companies that serviced computing equipment. And really the biggest problem people had was configuration issues. They would mess up the configuration on the machine and they'd bring it in and we would get it going for them again. The other service aspect, hard drives are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, or memory was going in, or they needed faster modems. So we would install that equipment. In the case of hard drives, they'd want everything from their old hard drive to their new hard drive. Yeah. So we would do a lot of data transfers for them.
Yeah, and the OS didn't handhold any of this back then.
No.
It was very easy to mess up your Windows 95 or your Windows 98 installation.
Especially they could really toast.
You could really mess things up. Yeah.
The configurations. And most of the customers were fun. We had a regular set of customers I became good friends with. Some I know to this day. The other Computer Renaissance owners that I knew a lot of computer throughout the U.S. because we would meet twice a year and share ideas, the whole organization. And at its peak, it got up to 300 plus stores.
In the U.S.? In
the U.S. Well, and Canada. Canada had quite a few. The customers were fun. We had some cranky ones that might get intoxicated at night and mess up their PC, and they'd call and try to clog my recording system because they're mad because their computer didn't work. And then they'd come in the next day all happy. Will you fix this for me? Okay. You didn't sound too happy when you left the message, but we didn't have too many troublesome customers.
I guess we got to talk about break-ins and robberies and theft that you had to deal with.
Yeah, that was really annoying. You would have shoplifters. Didn't have a lot of shrinkage that way because the staffs were pretty clued in to try to watch out for that. But the break-ins, I had a South store at South Center, which is a big retail mecca in Seattle. And if they were doing any kind of emphasis on drugs, that store would get robbed. So if there was a shortage of meth or drugs like that, cocaine or whatever it was at the time, they would need to break into stores more often, trying to get equipment to fence. But we had barrier glass, a plastic film on it. It was very difficult, so they didn't really get away with very much equipment. The monitor at the front of the store. Yeah. The alarms are going off. But the issue was the cost of the glass and the framework was so expensive.
Oh, the damage got done.
That was
so it wasn't even the items itself.
The inventory was minor. I mean, they just didn't take that much gear.
Yeah.
And the gear was bigger back then, right?
Right. Harder to get away with it.
Harder. We did have what in Federal Way was really funny. It was pretty well protected. It was next to a nightclub in that mall as well. So when the nightclub closed, Federal Way police would call in King County police. They needed extra help because there were some bad elements in the nightclub.
Keep that under
control. So they would be all throughout our parking lot. We're closed, but there's a lot of police presence.
That's nice.
But not always. And one guy, after a few too many drinks apparently at this club, decided he wanted the 17-inch monitor that was in the front of the store. And he broke the window and was able to take this 45-pound monitor out. And he's running across the parking lot, and the police just arrested him. So, yeah, he was caught.
Didn't even get away with it.
Des Moines store, one of my employees left it open all night, and nothing ever happened there. At that warehouse.
At the other warehouse.
Lucky. They'd be trying to take 15-inch monitors. They'd be pretty...
It's time-consuming.
They would get tired.
Yeah.
The most vulnerable item would be laptops. And we didn't sell new laptops. We sold...
Always
customers
used.
would trade them in, and we'd sell used laptops. They were popular, and they would attempt to steal those during the day. But that, again, my employees... I didn't ask them to chase them down, but they would chase
Wouldn't let them get away.
No, they would not get away.
That's impressive. Can't do that now.
I don't know if you remember Mike and Jeff. They were not going to allow people
I wouldn't have messed with those guys.
They were football players.
Yeah, big dudes.
In high school, yeah.
What was some of just like the weirdest gear you got in, or maybe interesting that you recall?
The weirdest gear. I got an Osborne And
I'll put a picture on.
VIC 20s, VIC 64s. We didn't deal in that, but we would get those in on trade.
On trade as someone moved to PC.
When I was buying equipment in lots from banks and health organizations and whatnot to get used computer gear, I did get in one shipment over 100 IBM Selectric typewriters.
How'd you get rid of those?
Such a beautiful typewriter.
Yeah, they're nice. They're nice. I wish I had one.
They really are a beautiful. I wish I'd kept one. But we'd sell those for $20 a piece, and people would go, "Wow, those are like $1,000 brand new." And
well, they're $1,000 again. I'll tell you that.
And they're used. That's kind of scary.
Remember, you had just fleets and fleets of IBM PS2 gear.
Oh yeah.
Remember that? There's a box up there. That's that stuff.
Right.
And it's so funny. That stuff's so highly collectible now. And I remember messing around with it as a kid. It's like this core memory stuck in me. So now I want it now. But it's like I used to have unlimited access to all this stuff. And now I'm buying one for $150 on eBay. And it doesn't even work.
We had a guy come in. He would look over. He'd try to have one of everything in his basement. He had his own museum in his basement of his house. He had shelves, he said. He showed me pictures. And he came in. I think we had like a Radio Shack Model 1.
Yeah, TRS-1.
TRS-1, and he bought that because he needed it for his collection. And so he had Macintosh, he had PCs.
I can't make fun of him. So
the PS2s. Yeah, I wish I'd kept some of the gear that came across.
Yeah.
We got bank surveillance video equipment, where they were recording the teller windows and stuff. Some gear I could not sell, you basically end up giving it away. And we would sometimes do that, give this away with the PC just
to get it out of here.
It's in their garage, not in our store.
Right.
And apparently they would have a use for it. Televisions, we'd get these televisions because employee break rooms and stuff, there were televisions. So when we bought this bulk gear, it would come with TVs.
Right.
So we would sell those, put $20 on them. And
get a few bucks out of it.
They would buy them, and not something we normally sold in the store, but we would try to...
Bunch of rant.
Well, it kind of, again, it fit my personality. I cannot bring myself to throw something away. I think it's a shame what we put in landfills when it could be useful.
Where I got it from. I guess I'll ask again if you could see that the end was coming, I guess.
Yeah. When did I recognize that things were going bad?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't recognize it until it was bad. It's sort of like the frog in the
boiling
tossed
water.
in the water that's brought up to a boil.
Yeah.
However, there was a warning ahead of time that I just didn't recognize as a warning, and it was a store owner for Computer Renaissance in California had called me up late '98 and said, the market there was tanking and that this is going to tank everywhere because he goes, California is the canary in the coal mine. If it's tanking here, it's just a matter of time, and it's going to happen everywhere else. And sure enough, a year later.
So that was 98.
98.
98. And so 98 was one of your best years, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I kind of tossed his
advice
aside, but in retrospect, I wish I'd better be on the watch for this.
Right.
But I wasn't, and that would have helped a lot. Would have been able to have a way more graceful shutdown of the business. Is
there anything maybe you would have done differently from like an entrepreneurial standpoint?
No, I think the advice, I kind of was, I overexpanded too rapidly, and I guess advice would be not to do that. You should max out your current activity till you can no longer stand being in one location or two locations. Until you're losing money, not expanding. Maybe is one way to look at it. You're leaving money on the table. Expanding adds so much risk that you should make sure that it's that you really are at that capacity problem. I would have been fine with just 2 stores, 1 warehouse operation, and but wanted to expand to that larger footprint, and ultimately that wasn't the thing to do. Right. Knowing what you know now, would you do the whole thing over again? I would do it over again. You were asking if it would hurt my interest in computing. No, it never hurt my interest in computing. I love programming. I love computing hardware. I'm really into embedded type systems today just for hobby. Not from a business standpoint, but it just keeps my mind active. I enjoy that. So no, it's computing has been my career for ever since I got out of college. So
I guess an interesting tangent into some of the stuff you did at Boeing, which was also computing, is I think one of the projects you led was getting off of mainframes.
Yeah, I didn't work on MCAS.
Yeah, yeah, he didn't work on MCAS. we could do a whole video about Boeing.
Let's not even go there.
Yeah, so we grew up in the Seattle area, and so anecdotally, maybe more true than anecdote, if you were a middle class family, we were in the middle class, you were either a Boeing family or a Microsoft family.
That's true.
And we lived in Renton, where they build the 737s, or they used to. I don't know if they still do.
They still do.
And we were a Boeing family. So Dad worked for Boeing for 30 years.
32 years.
32 years. My father-in-law worked for Boeing for over 30 years. Half my friends, their dads, their moms worked for Boeing. So
your grandfather worked there for
dad's dad, my grandpa,
38 years.
38 years at Boeing. So yeah, big Boeing family. Unfortunately, these days. But back to the computing stuff. So, I mean, you were doing IT stuff at Boeing, and one of the interesting projects, I think, was getting off of a mainframe billing system or something like that, right? And virtualizing that.
Yeah, we had to, we would move our old accounting systems. I was doing the IT for the finance organizations, and we would have development projects that I had charge of. Well, Boeing used to have a big computing department.
Right.
I mean, it was actually a sales division. Sold lots of software, did lots of implementations. Oh. Yeah, they've always had a big computing
arm.
Not so much anymore, but so right at the end, I was responsible for replacing a sales tool for selling aircraft. We implemented. It was a very, very large system that also handled the receivables for the aircraft. So when airlines pay for the plane, it comes through the system.
Right.
And it also tracked sales of the aircraft so that the sales team could put together a campaign to go discuss with an airline to sell 50 aircraft. But they're marked so that they don't overcommit the assembly line.
Right. And then to close us out, so Dad's always been a really driven, entrepreneurial, hardworking, goal setting guy.
Problem
I
solving.
like to think I got a fraction of it. So you went through the whole, you worked your ass off at Boeing for 3 decades. In between, you did this computing thing, which turned into a really big problem and hardship to get through. And all the while, you were doing rentals and all this other stuff you've been up to and all your other hobbies. And what kind of drives you and keeps you going through all these hurdles and motivates you, I guess, from an advice perspective?
I think, you just can't give up. You have to work through any kind of problem you have and get through it. I mean, if you let it overwhelm you, you'll lose the game. So you have to be engaged in it. If you want a simpler life, don't do those things. But that just wouldn't be exciting to me.
Right.
I want that.
So that there's an excitement in the challenge.
I like the challenge.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of the same way. Well, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, thank you, Colby.
Hope you enjoyed what we had to talk about here today. Let us know if there's more you'd want to hear about. Dad's always open.
Yeah, and if any Computer Renaissance people happen to see this, I'd love to hear from you guys. So
yeah, reach out, comment. Thanks. We didn't get to touch on it while we were talking, but Dad kept copies of the monthly physical publication called Online, of course, that the Computer Renaissance headquarters would send out to store owners. In the earliest copy he has from December 1995 that has sales numbers, they're reporting an average store volume for the 13 stores that were open in September of 1995 as $53,000. In the latest copy he has from July 1997, they were reporting an average franchise store volume of $79,000, at least for the stores they were reporting right here. At the time of this report, the average annual volume per store was $560,000. Off camera, Dad mentioned that his stores on good years would do upwards of $1 million. But of course, that's revenue, not profit, and as you heard, things didn't go well in the end. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and a huge thanks especially to my Patreon followers. I posted that I was going to do this interview about a month ago, and they supplied tons of great ideas and questions for my dad. I hope I got to everything. And a special thanks to my dad for doing what he does best, not getting rid of anything. Every Computer Renaissance or Gro Biz document you saw was scanned by me. These were firsthand. Dad kept all this stuff relating to the business. I scanned it in on this computer right here. So all that stuff you saw was from my dad's personal files. Definitely let us know what you thought, or if you had more questions in the comments. I will do my best to answer all of them. In the meantime, I hope I see you in the next one. Thank you so much.